IVM.
Welcome to All Things Policy, a daily podcast by the Takshashila Institution. We are a bunch of policy nerds based in Bengaluru, and we like bringing fresh perspectives to Indian affairs and Indian perspectives to global affairs. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and join us for today's chat. Hello and welcome to All Things Policy. I'm Manoj Kewalramani, and today I have with me my colleagues Sunila and Ameya, and we're going to be doing a special episode. Now, this will be a special recurring episode, right? So we're going to be talking about the COVID-19 vaccine and all the developments related to the vaccine, or different vaccines and the developments related to them. And we thought that we'd do this every 2 weeks so that we can capture all the news and all the developments and help put all of that into context for our listeners, given that this is the most important thing from the point of view of countering the pandemic and ending the pandemic right now. And there's lots of news and there's lots of confusion. So we thought we'd try and bring some clarity in that and do that every 2 weeks. So Ameya and Sunila, welcome to the show. Thank you, Manoj.
Hi.
All right, so let's just begin with firstly, what are the big developments that have happened this week, right? I mean, I follow China, so I noticed that something that's happened with the Chinese developed vaccine in Brazil, and we'll talk about more about that also. But I think the biggest announcement was that Pfizer saying that its vaccine actually works to a large degree. So can one of you just sort of first tell us, Ameya, probably, what's happened with Pfizer?
So basically, Manoj, what has happened with Pfizer is that they've come out with some interim press release. So this is not actually data that we have right now, but it is definitely the first claim that is coming from any of the phase 3 trial vaccine candidates. So what we know so far is that it's a mRNA vaccine. And as you said, that, they're claiming that 90% of the recipients can actually gain immunity because of the vaccine. And this they observed 7 days after the second dose. So it is important to note over here that, this is a 2-dose vaccine. So you need to do those 2 doses, which are probably 28 days apart. And the good news is that the trial had over 43,000 people. So we know that this is the first example of a mRNA vaccine actually working in large numbers. So that's a very good news for us. But the main thing is that this is just an interim press release, right? So we do not have any data that we can see as of now. Pfizer is saying that, we'll probably release something in the coming month or put something in a peer-reviewed journal or something. But we still need to wait for that and see how things, proceed from there. So there are a lot of things that are still unknown about it. We just know that there's an interim press release. And, as we know that, this is just a series of updates that we'll start getting from all these people, all these major vaccine candidates whose, vaccines are basically in phase 3 trials. So we were expecting to hear from AstraZeneca first, but then Pfizer has made some announcements. Moderna is supposed to do this. But as and how all these vaccines are going through rolling reviews, we know that this data will keep coming out in the next 2 months or so.
All right. Before I sort of ask you a little bit more about this, can you explain what are the different kinds of vaccines? So what is an mRNA vaccine for somebody like me who has no clue what that means? To me, a vaccine is basically a shot that I take or maybe drops that I got when I was a kid. What does it imply?
So basically, there are different types of vaccines. Like you said, you could take them in orally, or you could have an injection that is given to you when you're a kid. With the COVID vaccine, the whole thing is that, you want it to be easy to be administered. And everybody wanted to get to the vaccine bit very quickly. So vaccine development usually takes a lot of time. It goes into 3 years, 5 years, 7 years. But as we have seen now, we've got to know about this within the first year of COVID-19. So what happens is that everybody is looking for a very quick way of developing the vaccine. And the mRNA is basically, or the DNA vaccines are very quick to manufacture. So usually in a vaccine, if the disease is caused by a virus, you would inactivate the virus or you try to weaken it before you try to give it as a vaccine. However, in an mRNA vaccine, you can simply synthesize this mRNA strand, which is basically part of each and every cell of us, but it codes for a protein. So what you're doing is you're taking this mRNA and injecting it into a human healthy cell. And now the mRNA will tell it what protein to make. But in this case, we are making the COVID-19 protein. So once you get the mRNA shot for COVID-19, your own cells will make the COVID-19 protein, which your immune cells will recognize as something alien, and they will, your immunity will start developing towards this. So the next time when you actually encounter the COVID-19 virus, your cells would have already seen the virus, so the immune response is much faster. The whole idea of doing a mRNA or a DNA vaccine is just that the scaling up is much simpler. You don't have to do cell cultures. You can just have a very quick way of manufacturing these bits, and then you just put it into a small lipid molecule and you inject the molecule. So it's very easy to administer, very easy to manufacture. So that's why Pfizer or even Moderna are the companies that will come up with their data very quickly, because they started their processes much earlier, because all they had to do was make like this 20-25 nucleotide mRNA. That's all.
So this is really interesting, right? I mean, because I remember, and I don't know how sort of true this is, but I remember sort of going back when the pandemic had started, or at least sort of when it was sort of when we were halfway through the year, you would hear these stories about, people dying because once you're infected, the immune system somewhere sort of does not recognize the virus and therefore it sort of overreacts in some way. I'm putting it very crudely. But the idea that there is an overwhelming reaction in the immune system, which then leads to more complications. So this particular form of vaccine probably will prevent that, right? Because your body becomes familiar with the protein.
Yeah. So the idea of any vaccine is that your body has to be familiar with what it is doing, with what it is encountering. And in this case, you just want to give it like a very small dose. What you're mentioning is basically a cytokine storm, technically speaking. And what happens in a cytokine storm is that your whole immune response goes into a hyperdrive and tries to throw everything at the invading virus, but actually affecting your own body system. But because you're doing a smaller vaccine, you're giving something, it's like a primer, it's like a trailer. So you've seen something, you know something about it, and then you decide how you want to respond to it. So that's what you're trying to do with the vaccine. So mRNA vaccines, they make it simpler, but large part of it is just to do with how you're going to manufacture it. So it's very easy to manufacture.
Okay, fascinating. Let's move on. Let's talk about AstraZeneca, right? From what I understand, they were also supposed to give some data right in November.
Yeah, so AstraZeneca, basically, it's a different kind of vaccine. So it's not doing the same mRNA bit. And they have also been working on this for quite some time. They also have their rolling reviews that are happening in the UK right now. So we should hear from them very soon. The reason why everybody is, patently waiting for AstraZeneca's data is because, one, it's going to be produced largely by the Serum Institute of India. So it is going to be manufactured over here. And, we are expecting, Serum has the capacity to do massive amounts of doses every year. So, if the AstraZeneca vaccine basically is made available, if it passes regulatory approval and all that, then it's going to be very easy to take this vaccine and deliver it to people, because like the Pfizer vaccine or the Moderna vaccine, there are some constraints to it. They need ultra cold storage, minus 80 degrees Celsius, transporting them and all that is going to be quite difficult. Whereas the AstraZeneca vaccine, most likely, you'd be able to put it in a regular fridge and transport it. Ice boxes and all that are okay to transport them. So we should be able to use the AstraZeneca vaccine in a much more easier manner. So I think the data is expected somewhere late November or early December. And the way AstraZeneca is looking at it is that once the data is made available, they are going to approach for an emergency use authorization. And like Mr. Poonawalla said, that if possible, they would want to make the vaccine available as early as 2021, January of 2021. So and because we know that Serum has started mass manufacture of their vaccine, so it is going to be very easy for Serum to actually start deploying the vaccine if need be. So at least if we're talking about emergency workers, healthcare workers, the frontline workers, we should be able to at least vaccinate them on priority very quickly if the AstraZeneca vaccine works. The question is, does the vaccine work? So that is what we need to see, because a few days ago, AstraZeneca trial was the one that was halted. So after a minor review, they were given the green signal to go ahead. So we need to just wait and see what data comes out, and then we'll be able to decide what to do with the AstraZeneca vaccine.
So the vaccine that is being produced by AstraZeneca, it's a little different from how the vaccine produced by Pfizer works. So this vaccine, it is made up of another virus of the adenovirus family that has been modified to contain the gene for making the SARS-CoV-2 spike protein. So the spike proteins are the crown-like structure that you see on the virus. So the adenovirus itself cannot reproduce and it does not cause disease. So once it has been given, the vaccine delivers the gene of the COVID virus into the cells of the body, and the cells then use the gene to produce the spike protein. So after the spike protein is produced, the person's immune system, it treats this spike protein as foreign substance and produces natural defenses such as antibodies and T cells against this protein. So this is how the vaccine works. It uses virus of adenovirus family and not a strand of RNA from the virus itself, as is the case in Pfizer vaccine.
So, do these different modes have implications for effectiveness, or is that just different ways to reach the same sort of goal? I mean, would therefore one be more prone to being effective than the other, or for a longer time? Is there anything like that?
Basically, there is not much of a we do not quite know. I think that would be the right way of saying it, because the way with mRNA vaccines is that we have not tried them before. This is the very first time anybody is trying out a mRNA vaccine at such a scale. So it's just the demand for a vaccine that has propelled mRNA vaccines to this level. We were still kind of struggling with the regulatory approvals and all that with mRNA vaccines. So we quite do not know if mRNA vaccines are more effective or they are not so effective. So if Pfizer says that our vaccine works 90% of the time, Russian Sputnik, they're coming out today and saying that, ours works 92% of the time. So there's not like much difference over there if you look at it, because the FDA, US FDA has clearly said that any vaccine that works more than 50% of the times, we'll just accept it. So in terms of what sort of how many people can it actually produce immunity in? We know very little data is available for different type of vaccines. What we know is that through our prior experience, the live attenuated vaccines or the inactivated vaccines are the ones that we regularly use. So, if it has worked before, it hasn't caused any adverse reactions, it should work this time as well. So it is all about how easy is it to produce it, how easy is it to inactivate it, how easy is it to actually take it from place A to place B and then, do the vaccination. So like if you can actually, I think there are a good number of people who are actually trying to do this through the nasal route. So if you can just, instead of giving an injection, if you can just, have a nasal spray that goes, that you can give to people, it's going to become much easier to do that. So but the mRNA thing won't work over there. So you would have to use a weakened virus. So that's where you will have to use a live attenuated or a weakened virus or something. And then you can do that. So, but it's not that, just because I've used a live attenuated virus, I will get 90% efficacy. And if I've used mRNA vaccine, I'll get only 80% efficacy. That difference does not happen because of the technique. The technique is for the manufacturing and the distribution. That is where it makes a huge difference.
Okay, so that's good to know. That's good to know. It's clarified something. Let's move on to this other big story that we've had this week, right? I mean, there was the trials of the Chinese-made SinoVac vaccine was stopped in Brazil. Again, this is in phase 3 trials, and they were stopped because they said there was a quote-unquote serious adverse event. Can you tell us a little bit more about exactly what's happened? And because from what I understand now, they are saying that this adverse event had no relation to the trials, yet for some reason the trials are stopped.
Yeah, so usually in a clinical trial, you're constantly looking for serious adverse events. So anything that happens to a patient, must be recorded. That's the idea of a clinical trial. So in a phase 3 clinical trial, you have tens of thousands of people and you're constantly monitoring them for adverse events. So, something like a nausea or vomiting or severe headache is also an adverse event. But a serious adverse event definitely is, much more serious, and it's most likely led to probably a death of an individual. We do not quite know right now whether this person received the vaccine or did not receive the vaccine. So, if you remember, in the case of AstraZeneca trial as well, there was a death, and then basically we were looking at when the data was analyzed, they realized that the person had not received the vaccine. So in a clinical trial, you usually divide people randomly and say that half of the people or two parts of the people will get the vaccine and one part of people will not get the vaccine. So what happens is that you're able to compare that the effect that is seen in the people is because of the vaccine or it is not because of the vaccine. So you should be able to show that there is a significant advantage of taking the vaccine. So that's the idea of a trial. And in case of SinoVac, what has happened is that there is a serious adverse event. All we know at this point is that it is not related to the vaccine. The institute which is handling this phase 3 trial was supposed to do a press conference yesterday, but that did not happen. So we're still waiting for these details. What is amazing is that Brazilian authorities have actually said that the SinoVac vaccine is the safest vaccine that they are trialing. So they have already said this before. And this is an inactivated virus vaccine. So again, it's not something that is very new to us. So we've used something like this before. But the problem is that again, China kind of raced through the approvals and gave it emergency use approval even before it could finish its phase 3 trial. So that was a wrong thing that China's kind of attempted in terms of clinical trials. Nobody tries to do that unless and until you get phase 3 clinical trial data. But they've kind of gone ahead. And they're actually using the vaccine in China to immunize hundreds of thousands of people under this emergency use program. So we don't know what is the effect over there. We do not have much idea about what has happened over there. But the trial in Brazil had over 13,000 participants, and it was supposed to end mid-November. So it's quite unfortunate that we've heard about this now and this has come out. But like any good clinical trial, it must be investigated. We should know what has happened. But at this point in time, they can't release a lot of data and say that, okay, so many people did not get the vaccine because it affects the trial. So we just need to kind of have faith in the agencies who are doing it and say, okay, fine, we'll wait for it. If they've said that it's not related to the vaccine, we have to take their word for it at this point in time. Let the trial complete, let the data come out, and then we should be able to make a better judgment of how the SinoVac vaccine actually works.
This is really fascinating because, yes, China began giving these vaccines, different companies and different types of vaccines from very early on. From April, May 1st, the PLA, the military was given emergency use, and then subsequently, and even now, from what I'm reading, they allow in some pockets students who are going abroad.
Yeah.
They can get a vaccine, which is all very strange because none of it has actually been cleared through phase 3 trials. Okay, so I'm going to move on. I'm going to come to you, Sunila, and I want to talk to you about this business of rolling review of vaccines. Explain to us a little bit exactly what this is.
Yes, a rolling review is one of the regulatory tools that the European Medicines Agency uses. So the European Medicines Agency is like equivalent of CDSCO in India, the Central Drug Standard Control Organization. So it uses this regulatory tool to speed up the assessment of a promising medicine or vaccine during a public health emergency. So under normal circumstances, all data on a medicine's or vaccines effectiveness, safety and quality, and all required documents, they must be submitted at the start of the evaluation in a formal application for marketing authorization. However, in the case of a rolling review, there's this Human Medicines Committee under the European Medicines Agency, which reviews data as they become available from ongoing studies before a formal application is submitted. So once the committee decides that sufficient data is available, the formal application is submitted by the company. And by reviewing the data as it becomes available on an ongoing basis, the committee can reach its opinion sooner on whether or not the medicine or vaccine should be authorized. So the committee's decision to start the rolling review of a vaccine, it is based on preliminary results from non-clinical studies suggesting that the vaccine triggers the production of antibodies and T cells. Now, when I say non-clinical studies, it means the initial testing of vaccine formulations in animal models. So, this non-clinical evaluation is done to determine the right dose to induce an immune response in appropriate animal models, which can then provide valuable information on immune response that can be expected in humans. So the committee bases its decision on the results that have been derived from non-clinical studies. Now the EMA, it has started first rolling review of COVID-19 vaccine, which is produced by AstraZeneca in collaboration with the University of Oxford. And also the EMA has started second rolling review of COVID-19 vaccine, which is known as BNT 162b2, which is being developed by BioNTech in collaboration with Pfizer. So the EMA, it is waiting for processing the ongoing data, analyzing, reviewing the ongoing data, which will help it to take a decision sooner for approving the vaccines.
All right, that's interesting to know that these are processes that are being followed, and I mean, given the fact that we've just spoken about it now, in China the process was completely sort of dumped, and here we're seeing clear process being followed. It's interesting to know that, and that sort of builds faith in a system over a period of time. I want to sort of come back to you, Ameya, and I want to talk about this thing in the context of this sort of trustworthiness that, and the fact that everybody's anxious and everybody wants a vaccine, and everybody wants whatever normalcy will mean once we come out on the other end of this pandemic. Everybody wants that normalcy to come back fast. And in that context, given the fact that there are already, in China at least, we know that people are being vaccinated. And even in India, you can see these adverts that come up on websites about, buying a COVID-19 vaccine. Can you tell us a little bit about what people should be wary of?
Yeah, sure. So maybe because, we've been doing vaccines for such a long time, I've been getting COVID-19 vaccine ads for quite some time. And it's quite strange that, even reputed, outlets are basically allowing these ads to run because, so it becomes very difficult that you're going to a news site to get news about the vaccine, and then it shows you an ad saying that, why don't you take this vaccine? So that's a very tricky area for a person to be in. But yeah, for listeners, I think they should be very wary of any advertisement that they're seeing of this sort, where they say that take this vaccine and it has been approved by China or Russia or India or whatever the ad says, because we quite don't know yet what is the overall picture. Like, there are multiple things. It's not just whether it can give you immunity. You also have to see what are the adverse events. How bad is it to take the vaccine? Does it give you headache? Does it give you vomiting? Does it give you fever? How does it work? If you are asthmatic, can you take it? If you are 12 years old, can you take it? If you're 65 years old, can you take it? There are multiple questions that go around approving a vaccine. And, making a decision just on the basis of looking at an advert is quite dangerous. So I would recommend that, people do not really fall for these adverts, stay away from them for the time being. Once a COVID vaccine is approved, at least in India, we'll have much more information about it. We'll know what are the risks of taking such a vaccine. And then, it's better to take an informed decision over there. But there are some other ideas that people have that, probably they'll fly to a country that has a vaccine approved and take a shot over there and then come back over here, and they would have this immunity or something like that. But all these vaccines that we know of so far need like 2 doses. As Pfizer said in their statement that immunity is developed 7 days after taking the second dose. So it's not that, you go get a shot and you are immune. It doesn't work like that. Your body is going to take some time to develop this immunity. So just stay away from these ads for now and let the regulatory bodies kind of take a call on which is a good vaccine, which is not a good vaccine. Let's see phase 3 data and then arrive at which vaccine is good to take, which vaccine is not good to take.
Yeah, I think I want to sort of underscore over here that, vaccination per se is a good thing to do, and people must get yourself vaccinated over the years as we have done. Those create positive externalities over a period of time. So vaccinations are good, but those are products which have been created after years of research, after clearly laid down regulatory procedures which have ensured that those are safe, and that's why those are good things to use. At present, because this is a new virus, vaccines are currently being developed, and they're being developed at record pace. So therefore, it's important to not jump the gun. Be careful. Once there is regulatory clarity in terms of vaccine is declared safe, yes, by all means, go ahead and use it. But, until then, don't fall for schemes and, pranks or whatever else, even malicious sort of ideas by people. But, keep wearing your mask, keep socially distanced. The pandemic is still here. It's not gone anywhere. And the virus does not respect holidays and festivals or any of that stuff. So keep following that as much as you can. So we've talked about some of these things which are, hopeful in the fact that we might get a vaccine soon, but we've also talked about some of these things which are, still difficult in the fact that this pandemic is still not over. I want to get both of you to tell me something good, to tell our listeners something good, some good news as we go down, guys.
Yes. So there's a possibility that the vaccine that is being developed by Zydus Cadila, it could be needleless. So in the clinical trials, they are trying the both versions, one with needle and other without needle. In its submission to Clinical Trials Registry of India, they have mentioned PharmaJet, which is a company that specializes in needle-free vaccines. So how this needle-free vaccines would work is like they use injectors that use a narrow stream of fluid that goes through the skin without a needle in about just 1/10 of a second. So the people from Zydus Cadila are saying that it will be really a hassle-free vaccine. So hopefully that should work out.
Okay, that does sound awesome. Ameya?
Yeah, I think that's Sunila kind of sums up very good news for all people who don't like needles. But yeah, I think that I guess I'd stick with that and say that that's a very good news for people who want to get vaccinated.
All right. Okay. So with that, we're going to call it a day today. Like I said, folks, this is an effort that we'll be carrying out every 2 weeks. So every 2 weeks, we'll be here on All Things Policy talking about developments with regard to the COVID-19 vaccine. So if you've missed some of the news, or if you want to catch up on information, and if you want to see it contextualized in the right way, please do listen to us. Also, if you have any questions for us, if you've heard this entire episode, you've probably realized that there was very little that I have known about the different types of vaccine, the processes that are involved, and how they can be administered. And I've learned a lot through this. So if you have any questions, do feel free to reach out to us via email, through our website, or on social media. We're on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn. So do feel free to reach out to us with your questions, and we'll try and address them every 2 weeks during this podcast. Thanks, Ameya. Thanks, Sunila.
Thank you,
Manoj. Thanks, Manoj.
If you liked our show, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can tune into them on the IVM Podcast app, ivmpodcast.com, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can also follow IVM on social media. The handle is @IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And hey, if you'd like to dive into Takshashila's research on technology, strategy, and economic affairs, check us out at our Twitter handle @TakshashilaINST or our website takshashila.org.in.
I hope you enjoyed that show. If you aren't following us on social media, please do. We're IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. It's been a really, really great week on the network. Let me make a couple of recommendations to you guys. Agla Station Adulthood, they have an extraordinary episode on relationships. Ritasha and Ayushi, as always, do a bang-up job. I think you'll really enjoy that conversation. Check out Edges and Sledges, where DJ Ashwin and Varun have been talking to fans from different IPL teams on every episode. It's a really, really interesting project they've taken on during the course of the IPL. And as it comes to a conclusion, I'm sure you'll love to hear their thoughts on the tournament as a whole. I want to mention Uncle Please Sit. They had a really great episode which dove into why is pollution so bad. And I think that given the circumstances we're dealing with right now, it makes a ton of sense to listen to that. Cyrus had a really great week on his show as well. On the Monday episode, he spoke to Raj and DK about all kinds of stuff. He was in one of their early movies. Definitely a fun conversation to check that out. And finally, let me talk to you about the Wire Talks with Siddharth Bhatia. We're very excited about this show. On the first episode, Jairam Ramesh is there having conversation with Siddharth Bhatia about the legacy of Indira Gandhi. I think you will really, really get something out of this. Do give it a listen. And with that, I hope to see you again next week.
Whether you're an established sports person or a budding one, or simply a sports enthusiast, join us, Tanvi and Shlok.
We are two passionate pro badminton players talking policy, mindset and everything sport.
So tune in to The Millennial Athlete every Monday.
Only on the IVM Podcast Network.
Trust us, it's gonna be lit.